Hello, everyone. I'm very excited today to have on the line with us Critigen, a global IT service provider, to help us discuss how they use data to troubleshoot the home worker experience. As ways of introductions, my name is Stacy Leidwinger, and I'm with the marketing department here at Goliath. I also have Yemi Ladyju, our senior technical consultant, who's going to demonstrate how data can be leveraged and extended to quickly troubleshoot issues. And then in a minute, I'm going to do a more formal introduction of John Bennett, who is joining us from Critigen to talk through real-world examples on how data has helped him and his organization better support their clients. Just to walk through some housekeeping, I talked through the agenda already for today. Please do throughout submit questions in the Q&A box. We will try to get to them throughout, but especially we'll address them at the end, so do not hesitate to put them in. One question we always get is, will this recording be available? Yes, you will have a recording of this webinar in your inbox within the next 24 hours. And also, upon closing out of the webinar, you're going to have a short survey. It will take less than a minute to complete. Please give us your thoughts. We want to make sure that we are producing high quality content that is providing value to our community. So we look at those survey results and really try to modify our content to fit your needs. With that, I do want to welcome John Bennett today here. John works for Critigen in the UK. He leads their project control practice, and he uses Citrix overall to support all of their clients. And he's been involved in the Citrix environment for many years, going back to Citrix Metaframe 20 years ago. He now brings his managed IT experience along with that of Oracle Primavera, or P6, to deliver successful solutions. And this is critical because Critigen's a global leader in delivering spatial consulting, design, integration, and support services, and really help clients across their globe enable designers and builders to use that geospatial technology to provide better work and better results. And so with that, Critigen has been a faithful customer of Goliath since 2018, really ensuring that they can deliver high customer satisfaction as their customers are using these very resource-intense applications through their Citrix environment. John, thank you again for joining us today.
Hello, everybody, and thank you. Thanks, Stacey.
So before I totally turn it over to John, just wanted to do some level setting, right? First on, who is Goliath? Goliath offers monitoring and troubleshooting software for globally distributed workforces. Now, we work with even the smallest organizations to the large, scaling both technically and economically to meet their needs. So we have organizations like Critigen today, who is supporting a very remote distributed environment. We work with companies like Penn National, who even before the pandemic and everyone was working from home, had remote worker initiatives where they needed greater visibility to anticipate, troubleshoot, and prevent end user performance issues. In healthcare, we have a focus because we offer technology that allows you to have an end-to-end view, not only across your IT delivery infrastructure, being Citrix or VMware Horizon, but also across your electronic health records, EHR systems like Epic, Cerner, Allscripts, Meditech. And when our customers hire us and work with us in order to anticipate, troubleshoot, and document that end user experience, they tell us that it's almost replacing 2 full-time troubleshooting experts. It's as if they've hired someone full-time, available 24/7, 365 days a week to support their infrastructure. And the reason for that, if we go to the next slide, Yemi, is because frankly, there's just not enough experts out there to support these complex infrastructures. So this is some simple math, and this is something John and I had talked about earlier when he first brought Goliath in around the value Goliath brings. And the challenge is there's a high demand for Citrix expertise. Citrix boasts on their website, they have over 400,000 end customers. Assuming that for most organizations, you need 2 to 3 experts to ensure that you're delivering a strong experience, that means the demand is roughly 1.2 million. The reality is the supply is much lower. You've got your Citrix technical professionals. There's only about 62 of them. Then you've got the next layer of certifications, which at the high end might be 150. And then even from there, everyone else that has taken maybe an exam or had some training, at most, you're less than 60,000. And so it's this discrepancy around the need and the supply that really drives the need for a purpose-built tool with built-in automation that is going to automate your troubleshooting workflows and give you data to quickly pinpoint when issues do arise. The other big piece of this is if you do have experts and yourself, you're an expert, you probably spend way too much time troubleshooting basic issues or having conversations with other IT teams like the network team, the storage team, other vendors, trying to identify root cause, and in that, wasting a lot of time when your focus is trying to make sure that you're maintaining a high quality system, that you're always using the latest releases, that you have the right back-end support. John, would you say this depiction is accurate to what you see around kind of the customer base and even some of the challenges you faced prior to Goliath?
Yeah, absolutely. Back in 2018, we really struggled for data. We were having performance issues, but we just really didn't know where to go. We suspected it was the Citrix infrastructure. So one of our options could have been, do we bring in a consultant? Do we bring in a specialist? But what we really wanted was just data. We were capable people, but we didn't have the ammunition at our hands to discuss how Citrix was performing to our network colleagues or our storage colleagues. And it was a bit of a guesswork. So when we brought Goliath in, it gave us that data that we felt was a better business value than a short-term consultant.
Great. And I think, John, you and I have spent a lot of time talking about this too. The reason you need that deep expertise is because the complexity of delivering a Citrix or even VMware Horizon, it's, I heard it from another customer. They called their VDI infrastructure a tangled web of technologies. It is no less than probably 15 different vendors that all have to work in concert together at the same time to deliver that end user experience. And if there is one potential failure point, then slowness is going to creep into that experience or potentially not able to complete and full logon. And so when you think about it, especially now with the pandemic and having so many remote users, you have different users across different locations, whether they were from endpoints such as their home office or even when they were back in their local office. So right here, every user has a different experience. They're using a different endpoint. They're using different applications. They have different access points, whether it be the home Wi-Fi. Are they using a hotspot? What's the quality of their Wi-Fi? If they're back in the office, what network are they using? Is the network strong on their specific floor relative to other floors? And then you just talk about the infrastructure. So yes, you have your Citrix infrastructure, but that's even made up often of a NetScaler gateway, storefront services, broker and delivery services, the desktop or the application. If you're an EHR, if you're healthcare, you have EHR systems. John, in your world, you have Primavera, P6, and other very much resource-intense applications for the design community. Underneath that, then, you have just your core back-end systems, whether it be licensing, profile servers, Active Directory, and then below that, you've got your hypervisor layer. And these are really providing that support and infrastructure. And so for many of you on the phone, you realize the complexity, but those that you're working with might not understand. And so when an end user calls in and says, I can't log in, or Citrix is slow, or Primavera P6 is slow, they don't understand why it's so hard to troubleshoot the issue. It's because in any point of these areas, you could have a potential failure point. So maybe it's something within Active Directory where you have an incorrect driver map within your GPOs. That itself results in slow logon speed. And so what's critical, and what, John, you're going to spend quite a bit of time, I know, talking about, is having that purpose-built tool that can give you insights across this entire experience, factoring in end-user behavior, and using built-in automation and intelligence to serve as that expert so that you're not spending hours hunting and pecking every time an issue arises. So with that then, John, I'm going to turn it back over to you and talk about, what really led you to look at Goliath and what Goliath is doing for you at a high level, and then we'll jump into some of the troubleshooting use cases.
That's great. So as that previous slide really showed, there really was, before we had the data from Goliath, there was really no total ownership of problems. you know, you'd obviously have the service desk. They would receive a ticket that someone's reported their application is slow, but then it would go to the apps team, who really wouldn't know whether it was the network or the storage or the server or the database. So we'd be pointing fingers at each other, trying to help the customer, but actually really not know where to go. So back in 2018, we engaged Goliath with those business problems, and we've been working ever since. It's been a really good success, because now we do have the data. We now keep long history. We have up to 6 months of session data that really helps us root cause all of the issues we get around performance, around reliability, around connection speed, logon times, stability within the sessions. And that was something we picked on a previous call that we had together. But something recently that came to light is obviously the global issue at the moment, and how many more people are now working from home for the first time, and yet they're still expecting a business class of internet connection. And the way I was thinking about that, it never used to be like that, I guess. You know, even 10 years ago, the internet in my office used to be terrible. At lunchtime, everybody would be on the news websites, and you couldn't actually do any application access at that time. But now it seems the other way around. Now that many more businesses have gone cloud and internet-based applications, that many businesses now have a good, or at least a much better internet connection. And actually going home is probably worse in many of my experiences anyway. So some of the customers who we've been working with recently have never known what it's like to access a Citrix application from a home internet on their laptops. And that was something that came to us recently, where we were receiving reports that people who we'd never heard from before around performance were now starting to report really serious performance issues using their Primavera P6 application over Citrix. They were saying that there's between 15 and 20-minute delays in even moving the mouse. And what we did is we looked into the Goliath system and had a look at their network connections. And as you can see here on the screen, if anyone's familiar with Goliath already, this is a classic layout that shows all of the sessions that this one user has had. And I've hidden their details to protect them, but you can see here that really in the end of March here, they were getting some really high latency values that would kind of explain why they were getting such poor performance. You know, it's not uncommon that people might report slow performance in P6 if they're working on large projects in large databases like we have. So we will do all our usual checks, and in those instances, everything was coming out clear. We knew the database was well, there was no locking, there was no performance issues. And yeah, looking back at this on Goliath, it showed immediately where the problem was. So through a series of screen shares, I showed this with the customer, and I said to them, look at these numbers, look how bad this is for you, look at the numbers of your colleagues or me or others, look at your sessions when you were back in the office, when you were getting much better performance. And it really helped hone his mind that it wasn't something that I could actually fix directly. It had to be something he had to go and talk to his internet provider and resolve. And the data here was so important to be able to just immediately remove the doubt, where I could have easily said, oh, it all looks fine for me, I can't reproduce your problem, and then we'll be in a bit of a stalemate. But this was the data that he needed then to go back to his internet provider to say, what are you doing with my connection? I might be able to access my shopping site, but I need to access this business critical application over Citrix, and whatever you're doing in your network needs to change. And I think what we've got here is the next screen here. And again, if you're familiar with Goliath, and Yemi's going to show you a live demo in a few minutes, but what you can do is you can drill down to any of those sessions and then start looking at any of those high latency scores to try and understand, is that a recent thing? Is that been happening all across his session? And what you can see here is the scale on the left of this chart is such a crazy high value compared to what you're used to, where sessions should be in the tens of milliseconds, not the hundreds of thousands of milliseconds. But yet that's what this customer was poorly experiencing, unfortunately. you could click here and you could look at each of the sessions, and at each of the high latency points, he was getting some really long looping in the network or something that was stopping him getting out to us on our servers. And that's what these charts are really again helpful for him to take back to his provider to get the support he needed. And as you can tell, that this is real data again. This is him now a few weeks later. This is now April, and he's back to normal. So he's still working from home. He's still on the same version of receiver. He's now seeing a much more acceptable latency, and he's now is a happier guy. So this was a real great success, that the data we had from Goliath meant that we were able to get this over and done with within a sort of an hour or so of conversation, rather than potentially days and weeks of crisis meetings and finger pointing and so on. It was just an extra value that we had from Goliath that we felt we had to share with you on this call today. I think, Yemi, you're going to show some of this live now.
Absolutely, and I think, thanks, John. I think that was really indicative of some of the things that we hear a lot from customers, where, you know, without sort of the objective information, it's really hard to have conversations. Either it's with the internal teams, like the networking team, the storage team, or in your case, or in this case, you know, a home user who's, you know, logging into the environment, trying to do sort of business critical activities, and not being able to access it. You know, things like that can be very frustrating. But when you do present this person with objective information, things start to become smoother, because now there's an actual action items for you to do to remediate the issues. So with that, I think what a good point as of now is to jump into the technology and walk through, you know, the process in the case of, you know, finding out a particular user session and what's actually impacting it. So, you know, as John mentioned, this is typically the screen that, you know, we would want to take a look at to try and diagnose or to find what's actually causing these sort of issues in an environment. So here you can see all of the users, you can see you know, all of their sessions for a particular time period. John also mentioned that they don't, they have data kept historically for about 6 months. So here in our technology, it can actually go and go back and pull historic sessions. So in my session, in my case here, I'm pulling back sessions for the last 4 days. But I could, if I wanted to, go back months, weeks, if I wanted to, isolate an individual user if I wanted to. I assume that's what John did in his particular case, and pull up all of their sessions over the last, you know, 3 months, 4 months. We don't average or roll up any information, so you get the same amount of granularity in a session from 3 months ago or 4 months ago as you would from a session from today, which really gives the ability to show someone, okay, this is exactly what has changed in all of your sessions, and that's actually what's causing the slowness. But in this case, let's actually drill into an individual user session the same way John would in that particular case. And here you get a pop-up now of about 7 or 8 tabs, and it breaks down everything that went into this user session into these tabs here at the top of the screen. And it starts off here with the summary screen. The summary screen, quite frankly, is the single stop shop for being able to come up with quick answers as to what's causing slowness inside of a user session. So you can see all the components that went into the session. You can see their logon times at a high level. But in this case, you can see actual round trip times here, which is depicting whether or not this user is or isn't for a session. Similar in John's case, you can see that this particular user is not having the greatest session. And when we talk about the information or the metrics that we collect that allow you to delineate what's causing these sort of problems, we can start here at network latency. This is real-time network latency, not the typical ICMP or ping-based network latency. This is a metric that we're getting from the ICA protocol itself. So what this tells us is whether or not the high round trip times are being driven by high network latency or something else. right? So if it doesn't show up in network latency, then it has to be a resource issue or maybe an application issue. But in this particular case, we can see definitively that those high round trip times are being driven by network latency, because network latency and round trip times have about the same amount of milliseconds of latency. So this tells us, okay, this user is having a problem, and it is because of something within the network. To take it further, we can then look here at connection speed, and this is something that John mentioned, you know, for his particular customer. Here you can see the amount of bandwidth that is available for Citrix receiver at the user's endpoint. So wherever this user is located, their home office, whether it's an internal user, whether it's, you know, someone on the road using a, you know, mobile hotspot to access the environment, you can see how much connection speed they have to actually have a good Citrix session. So in this particular user's case, right away we're seeing 2 megabits per second connection speed, and it drops even lower, maybe to about 1.4 or 1.3 in this case, which, as we all know, is not enough to have a responsive session. So this quickly gives you the ability, it gives you, as you know, an IT professional, the ability to say to this user, hey, it does not look like you have enough bandwidth for your session. Here are some of the things that you can do to improve that. Number one, maybe move closer to your router, maybe connect directly to your modem, maybe take everyone else off the Wi-Fi so you can actually get some work done, or maybe, you know, upgrade your internet or your connection line speed so that you can actually have a better session, similar to what John's you know, customer ended up doing. So this sort of information directly from this summary screen really enables our customers to get detailed, or to have those conversations as needed. And keep in mind, we have a dedicated tab for the ICA protocol here. And this is the sort of section that we showed in the screenshots, where we can show ICA latency, network latency, and round trip time all on one chart, as well as the connection speed and bandwidth in this chart on the right-hand side. So you can really drill into it, zoom in and zoom out, and identify, okay, at what portions this user is having a problem and what's actually was driving that issue. So John, I had a question for you. So obviously, you know, we're talking about a home user connection here, as most people are connecting in from home. Has any of this information been useful, you know, outside of troubleshooting a home user connection or a home user issue?
Well, so it's something we're going to touch on in a few minutes as well, but also that there's a number of people who are now working from home may not be on their business laptops. They may be working on home devices, you know, tablets and all sorts of things. And this again gives us the comparison of what their office performance was like, what their work PC at home is like, what their tablet performance or their home PC. It gives us that, like I say, that it keeps the history. It gives us all of that trending and comparison. It helps us with our troubleshooting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, it sounds like that having that historical data for you is really important, because that allows you to really have, you know, pre-change and post-change analysis to point to, okay, this exactly is what's causing the problems, as opposed to, you know, the standard finger pointing activities that take place in sort of a large IT environment. That makes a lot of sense. So, John, with that, we're just gonna, if it's possible, we can just flip over to the slide deck and talk about another issue that you were able to troubleshoot, or another issue that you were able to solve leveraging Goliath.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Yemi. So this is something we did touch on again on our previous call, but so again, in the business environment, we had quite a period of different versions of receiver on the laptops, where we were getting, again, because of that, we were getting various differences in performance, in logon speed, in reliability. And again, because Goliath gave us a view of all the different receiver versions out there, we were able to say to them, this is a few months ago, that you need to harmonize and standardize on a version of receiver, because that's going to improve your logon speed. And we really saw that big improvement back then. And as I mentioned just now as well, is that now that people are working remotely, they might not be on their fixed office desktop PCs anymore. They might be on a new laptop they've never used. They might be on a home personal device. And it's meant that there's a much more greater chance that there's different versions again out there, even though we had harmonized on our business laptops, but these new home connections were coming in now, and we were able to look in the Goliath, and we started to see a reproducing issue of our slow logins that we were seeing, and we were able to point them back to say, yep, these home PCs, they might not have been patched or upgraded for a long time. They've got a very old version of receiver. You need to update them, and that was one of the causes that helped us improve things recently as well. So although we had the instance of the person we just talked about in more detail, there was a more general view that being able to see all the receiver versions was an easy way for us to raise the standard across the whole environment for everybody.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and you know, that's something that we do hear a lot as well, as you know, being able to, or how Citrix receiver or outdated receiver versions really come into play, and you know, even additional things like user your user error and things like that come into play into the logon time. So I can flip over to the technology here and talk about, you know, where, you know, this is available and how our customers are able to use that. So, and, you know, without sort of, and, you know, hopefully this isn't a new thing, but, you know, this is the screen here, this Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Session Display. Again, this is where you would go when you want to identify what might be causing some sort of issue inside of a user session. So again, you can click down on the session, find historic sessions as well. So when you click down on the session, you now get that same pop-up of all the information. And here's where you have a dedicated logon tab to tell you the logon process. Keep in mind, also from summary screen, we're also able to see the receiver version that this user has. But clicking down here into the logon tab, it breaks down each stage of the process into explicit detail. So what's going on during the brokering stages of the process. What's also, so not only what's going on at the delivery controller, but what's going on at Citrix receiver. And this is without deploying any technology to the endpoint itself. We're able to see things like ICA file download or how long it took to establish the micro VPN connection. These sort of metrics or the latencies in these sections tell us whether or not this user has enough network connectivity at the time of his launching the environment. Then we can see things like startup time at receiver or other issues that could be taking place from a receiver version perspective. Now, this tells us whether or not this user's outdated or or receiver version on his machine is actually negatively impacting the user's logon times. And this is a live environment, of course, so we don't have the exact same scenario that was presented in the screenshots. But here at the bottom section, you can see each stage of the process broken down as well. So what's going on as far as brokering, server and client validation, which does take into consideration the receiver startup times and things like that. You can also expand authentication and see what OUs this user is a part of, what domain controller was in charge of authenticating the session, how long it took for those LDAP calls to take place. You can even break open the group policy section, where you can see each individual group policy that's affecting this session down to the policy name, how long each one is taking to execute. So maybe you're not having issues with receiver versions, but you're having issues with managing group policies and understanding, okay, what policies are applied, especially as users are moving from their home or from their working at the office to working from home? Are there duplicate policies that are then affecting the session negatively? Did you have to move different drives to accommodate this, but then now you have a drive mapping policy to a decommissioned drive? Things like that can be easily identified with some of the details that we collect here. And to John's case, being able to identify things like receiver version and how that is impacting the session, I know our customers find very helpful. John, I had a question for you as far as the details here. You know, let's say for instance you did have, I'm curious, or let's say you didn't have this sort of information. I'm just curious as far as how much, you know, time it would take you to be able to get this sort of information to troubleshoot, particularly that issue you had with the users receiver version.
Yeah, it's one of those sort of finger in the air or kind of questions, isn't it? Because you just, first of all, you need to try and get the attention of someone who's got access to the data. You need to try and convince them that there's a problem they need to look at. You need to bring your data with you, as much as you've got. You might be able to make a screen recording, or you might be able to reproduce it in front of them, and then you're going to have to workshop it and try and work it out. You know, we're talking then something that's seconds in Goliath then turns into hours and days, doesn't it, of analysis, where you're scrambling across a multitude of sources to try and find out where all these problems are coming from, and it's more sort of stabbing in the dark, isn't it, without not having this central view.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something that I think we hear a lot from customers as well. Not only having these details, but having it in one place really, you know, eliminates that, you know, searching and you know, going into different consoles and tools and consolidating or consulting with different teams just to be able to get sort of the information that you need. So that's a really good point. So with that, John, I'm going to pass it back to you to talk about sort of the last thing, which would be the monitoring rules.
Yeah, thanks. And really that just touched on the last point, really, is that Goliath is our holistic monitoring tool. It's not just monitoring our Citrix. We've put server agents on all of our infrastructure that supports P6. So the database servers, the web servers, file servers are all being monitored by Goliath as well. So we can look into the Goliath screens to see how is our entire service from the endpoint receiver going all the way back to the database server and its storage are all in the one Goliath screen. And we've developed with Goliath a number of monitoring rules that watches all sorts of things, like Citrix brokering issues, to high memory usage on the Citrix servers, the XenApp servers, to any kind of low storage on network drives, to all sorts of things. So the monitoring rules in Goliath is something that just happens every day for us. You know, we'll get an email notification pop up that a new person has had a brokering issue, and that raises our alarm to think, well, what's happened? Why can't this person connect? And we have something we can investigate. If we hadn't had those alerts, we would probably never have known there was a problem, and there could have been a person out there not knowing why there's a problem. He doesn't know where to go, and when it is logged, it then gets, you know, lost in some queue somewhere. Now we can be much more proactive through the monitoring rules. We are receiving daily reports on anyone who's having high latency, because now we've stabilized. Those sorts of things are now rare, unusual events. So we get a daily report of anyone in the last 24 hours who's had a high latency for the day, and it gives us something we can talk to them about. Is that something that they experienced in their own user interface? Were things particularly more clunky yesterday than they were the day before? And we can take that data back with us to help our colleagues investigate further. So that's just, again, something we get from the Goliath system. And yeah, to summarize that, I guess the whole spirit of this call has been around data. It's really helped us since 2018 on a number of our customers, where the Goliath monitoring tool has given us the we needed to fight the fight about getting better performance for the customers. So we've all benefited from the data that Goliath now shares with us. And really touching on that early point, we could, you know, when we were having these problems, we could have engaged a Citrix specialist. We could have brought someone in. They might have worked with us for a few months. They might have addressed some of these issues, but then they would have probably have left. We would have been no better off in terms of the data. So we really felt that bringing a tool in within our own capability, our own, you know, competent people were able to use the Goliath tool, and that just seemed to make a much more business value sense to do that at the time, and we stand by that now. We think it's a great tool. I think that's really it for me, Stacey.
Well, great. Thanks, John and Yemi. And please, again, submit any questions that you have in the Q&A box. I see a few have come in. One thing I did want to highlight, because I think it's a question that usually comes in, is what does it take to get up and running? So Goliath offers turnkey implementation services that can get you up and running in less than 2 hours. We do that with our white glove service to make sure that you're fully implemented. We also work with our technical consultant to get you leveraging our out-of-the-box alerts and reports immediately, because that starts to drive the visibility and data that we've talked about today. And then as a reminder, a big value part of what our clients find with Goliath is that embedded intelligence and automation, so that it's serving as a full-time troubleshooting expert. It's alerting you if issues are about to arise. It's guiding you, as Yemi showed you, through some of the documentation on how to leverage it and use it for troubleshooting. So you do not have to be that Citrix expert in order to use the data. So with that then, I think we're going to turn it over to questions. One of the first questions, and it kind of relates to what I just said, but I'd love, John, maybe to add some of your color commentary, is what skill set and how much training do you recommend for using this platform? So as I said, we at Goliath, our goal is to try to make it as simple and have that built-in workflow so that you don't need a ton of training. We do offer virtual-led training courses and have a number of documentations that walk you through these troubleshooting workflows so that you can pick it up quickly and easily. So we really find that customers attend maybe 2 to 3 training sessions and look through some of the content, but it is not a ton of time. And when I say 2 to 3, I'm talking about at 60-minute intervals, if that. John, do you want to add any feedback around what your experience has been, especially getting people up and running, and even yourself?
Yeah, only really just to back that up, really, that your guys helped us set this all up with the installation. We got ourselves working together, all the monitoring rules. So that was in effect a way of knowledge transfer for us as well. And as I said before, we were quite capable people. We just didn't have the data. So it really took only maybe a couple of hours of some good pointing in the right directions, and we were away with using this tool. So yeah, definitely back up your comment there.
And Stacey, one more thing that I wanted to add is that inside of our product, I know there's a lot of information that we went over. Inside of the product, in any one of the tabs in that troubleshooting screen, you can actually see here there's a question mark icon here at the top of the screen that takes you directly to a help article talking and giving you details into that exact tab that you're on. So what it does is it defines the metrics, it defines the sections, it gives you tips on how to use these metrics to trouble. So along with the training that we do, and we have a lot of videos and things like that, we also have sort of embedded in the technology knowledge-based articles. So let's say you forget how to leverage network latency to come up with answers. You have that available to you quickly and easily in a couple of clicks inside of the technology.
Great, thank you, Yemi. Next question, and maybe actually we'll start with John and then go to Yemi, is, John, did you look at any of the free tools that are out there, like Citrix Director, before going with Goliath, and why Goliath then?
Yeah, it's a great question, because we do have those tools, but they just don't provide the history that we're after. As we showed in our example, Director's great at showing you what it's like now, but I needed more than that. I needed to be able to go back to when he was in the office, where he was performing well. I needed to be able to look at all the different sessions, and that's just where your tool was superior to the inbuilt tools that we get. It was that history and that trending that was so important to us.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Historical reporting. I think, you know, John, you've made that extremely, you know, clear that, you know, a lot for your, you know, style or for troubleshooting and in your environment, the historical data is very important, and having it all sort of in one view to be able to take a look at it. Another thing that our customers tell us, and I think we have a slide that shows this, is when it comes to tools, free tools like Director, they do a really good job of monitoring the pieces that that are really focused on, you know, Citrix, right? So if you look here in the middle of this diagram, this portion here, all of the portions that are not red, those are the things that Director monitors. And, you know, we got this graphic directly from Citrix's website. But as we all know, you know, when it comes to delivering a good user experience, there are a number of other things that impact the user experience. Things like endpoints, things like you need availability testing. If you're talking about, you know, John's environment, you have different applications that you're publishing. You have a virtualization platform. You have all of those back-end systems. You have network and storage and configuration and things like that. So another major difference, another reason why customers choose our tool rather than the free tools, is the ability to monitor all of these different things in one single console, so that you have that full visibility. You know, so when issues do come up, you have, you know, alerts to tell you whenever there's an issue with your application database or your file servers or profile servers, or even connection failures and things like that. So anything that happens, you have that ability to monitor and get full visibility. Hopefully that's able to add some context to that question.
So the next question then is, does Goliath offer any data to track end user productivity?
I think, Stacey, I think I can take that one. Yes, we do have, you know, as you can imagine, we have, you know, detailed metrics into each one of these different users logging in, user sessions, and things like that. And we're able to then track these things on a regular basis and, you know, put them into a report. So specifically when it comes to productivity, we have an end user productivity report. And this report breaks down all of the individual users in the environment, as you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen. But you can then see their IP address, so where they're connecting in from, what components they're connecting in via, so whether it's a NetScaler, storefront, so on and so forth. You can see the start of their sessions for a particular time period, the end date, the current session state. But now you can see not only their duration, which is how much time that session was actually open. Here you can see how long they were actually interacting with the environment. So not just maybe watching a video or something like that, but actually creating ICA traffic. So you can tell whether or not they are, you know, maybe just either doing their jobs, or maybe, you know, opening up a Citrix session and going for a walk, or doing something else and just saying that they're working. So you have the interaction time, time that they are inactive. You have obviously the percent of time that they're active inside of their session. So if you see something like 5%, you know that that's an actual problem. And then you can also see here the maximum amount of time that they were inactive inside of their session, which gives our customers that additional insight into you know, what they were actually doing. Did they take lunch 3 times or something like that inside of their environment? So I know this is one of the reports that is being heavily used, especially in these sort of scenarios, to identify whether or not people are actually working, so that, you know, business line managers and other sort of executive staff can make those sort of decisions. Hopefully that answers the question.
Great. Next question, and I think, yeah, this is probably for you, or actually before we jump in, I guess, John, just curious, are there other reports that you use, whether it be end user activity or productivity? Anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, so on the productivity one, that's a great one. There's a number of angles that we benefit from that. One is a more mental health, that we're watching for anyone having long session times, extremely long session times. That alarms us to see if they really are using the system for that long a time, and if there's a real need for them, or whether they need more support. It's a great topic that report gives us. It also helps us internally cross-charge our customers, where if they are lighter users, then they might be expecting to pay less for the service, and this data backs up those kind of conversations. It also helps us just generally make sure we're properly licensed, that we've given a certain amount of users access, and when was the last time they logged on, how often are they logged on, when they are logged on, are they actually actively using the system. So that gives us that benefit. There's another one that I've just come to mind, that is this backend is all based on Microsoft Azure, which means you're paying by the minute for some of these resources. And sometimes people get into a habit of opening up all their applications at the beginning of the day and then just leaving them, sort of hogging the server resources. And then we're having to stand up additional session hosts to cater for the new demand, when actually, if that person wasn't active in their application, then maybe they shouldn't be logged on, freeing up that memory that someone else could have. It just keeps our kind of costs down as well. So that productivity report really helps us in many ways.
Great. Next question. I think Yemi, maybe you can answer this, and maybe then John, you can add any color around how you might use it. The question is that you showed Goliath providing metrics around individual sessions. Can Goliath provide metrics around the global infrastructure, helping, I think, John, some of the things you just said, around memory, CPU usage, maybe there's a bad controller causing performance issues?
Yep, absolutely. I think we have a dedicated view for that, and I think that's probably going to be a good place to start. So let me flip over here to the topology view, and this view is sort of that 50,000 foot view. It's a automatic discovery and dependency map view, and this is going to map out all of the components that actually impact the user session. So you can see here from left to right, the storefront servers, delivery controllers, the supporting servers in the environment. You can also drill down here into the delivery layer, and what you can now see is a logical breakdown of the environment. So you can see the delivery groups, the machine catalogs, the gold images, if those are available. And then to answer that question specifically, you can drill down into a specific delivery group, and now you can map back user experience to the different components that are available in that delivery group. So here you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, resource utilization, latency metrics. So ICA latency, round trip time, network latency, connection speed per delivery group, and then map that back to the delivery or to the machine catalogs, the hypervisor cluster down to the hypervisor host. So one view, you can see all of these latency and all of these user experience metrics down to the components that are actually supporting the environment. So this gives you a holistic view of, okay, what are my components and how are these components, or how are, issues on these components actually impacting the user experience. This is something that our customers use not only as a NOC view, because this leverages the monitoring rules and it gives you a color-coded sort of NOC screen that points to where servers or where issues are taking place on individual components, but this also shows you how these components are impacting your experience. So it's also used as a troubleshooting stop, particularly when it comes to identifying how components are bottlenecking performance.
Great. All right, I have one last question unless another one comes in. I think this is more for you, Yemi. Can Goliath integrate into Splunk or ServiceNow?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we have a number of different methods that our customers leverage to integrate with any sort of third-party tools like Splunk or ServiceNow, and there's a bunch of others out there. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, one of them that might be worth highlighting is, you know, we haven't delved too far into the data from a report standpoint and how you can get those reports out, but we also have third-party integrations with like Power BI, Tableau, Excel to get more visualization around the reports to show some of that trending also. Well, that wraps up the questions. I want to have a special thank you today. I find your stories also always very interesting, and I love to hear how our technology is serving you on a day-to-day basis. If anyone is interested in learning more or getting a free trial, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at techinfo@goliathtechnologies.com, and we'd love to get you set up. Thank you for everyone's time today.